behind the music. You will be inspired to think higher, realize your gifts. Join the Muses and Michelle, Madrina. Turn us up and through your speakers is the Muses of Music.
This is the live broadcast of the Muses Behind the Music. I am your host, Michelle Fallon, and with us today is our very distinguished guest, speech pathologist, Laura Purcell Verdun. So good to have you. I'm so excited about this, super excited about this. And let me do something real quick. Let me do some housekeeping to support by going on Facebook and liking our page and following the page, The Muses Behind the Music, YouTube, Apple, name it, IG, we're all over it. Wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, that is where you can find us, The Muses Behind the Music. Press share on whatever system you are using right now to see us. Anyway, welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being here. This is a question I need to ask you because I made an oompa, that's a flob, on calling you doctor. What's your title? What is your title?
So good afternoon, Michelle. Good afternoon, Muses. I'm Laura Verdun. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. I'm a speech pathologist. I have a graduate degree in speech pathology. I don't have an MD as a medical physician or a PhD, which is why then I'm not referred to as a physician.
Got you. Are you far from that? Like the work that you put in, is that far from the MD?
So they've had medical training and they do things such as, they're prescribing medications and making medical diagnoses. I would not prescribe medications. I would not provide a diagnosis. I provide guidance in regards to supporting diagnosis and interpreting symptoms and whatnot.
Okay. That's so good. That's so good to know. So is there a difference between a speech therapist and a pathologist? If so, what is that?
Sure. So we are all actually speech language pathologists. That's the name of the profession. Okay. And you'll hear other terms. Speech therapist is just another term, but I am, and we are all certified by the American Speech Language Hearing Association. So I'm a certified speech language pathologist. And then we were all licensed by our state organization. So for example, I am also licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the District of Columbia.
Laura, I have to share with our audience how you and I came in contact with each other quite some years ago as I was going through a battle of reflux, laryngopharyngeal. Now, did I pronounce that properly? Because I call myself.
No. So to make it simpler, you can say LPR or laryngopharyngeal reflux. Laryngo meaning larynx.
All up.
Yeah.
Okay. Laryngopharyngeal and you said
Yeah. So laryngo is voice, larynx. Pharyngeal is the pharynx, is the throat. Laryngopharyngeal reflux, distinguishing it from esophageal reflux. The esophagus is from the throat all the way down to the stomach.
Yes. One of the things that when I came to see you that I learned about was how many singers, this is like a very normal diagnosis that happens with a lot of singers, but unfortunately a lot of singers, and I just won't categorize it to that. I find myself doing that often because I'm a singer, but a lot of people who are using their voice, but specifically us, because we're so involved with the diaphragm, that we have this and we don't even know that it's there. That was part of my problem that I had no idea. How common is this really?
Well, 2 points to that. The commonness of not being aware is actually quite common. It's another name for LPR is referenced as silent reflux. Silent meaning there aren't any, at least seemingly outward signs of reflux. People expect symptoms such as heartburn or indigestion, and that's not typical of LPR. That is typical of esophageal reflux. So there may not be symptoms. The second is there very possibly could be symptoms, but you're not aware because you're used to it.
Yeah.
I don't mean you're not paying attention. I mean, you're just used to it. And so some of the other symptoms you're looking for that are not heartburn or indigestion are things like change in voice, roughness or hoarseness, pain in the throat, but pain meaning more like hotness or burning or rawness. Not so much itchiness, not so much achiness. Those tend to indicate other things. Mucus accumulation. People often think that, I have mucus or phlegm in my throat, and they automatically assume that it's related to postnasal drainage coming from above. So unless you're like snorting and you can really feel it draining down, you don't know that it's actually coming from above unless somebody examines you.
Right.
And then one of the other common symptoms is what's called globus sensation. That's a medical term. And that's just a lump in the throat sensation. And people usually localize here, which is the bottom of the throat behind the voice box, where the bottom of the throat empties into the food tube. So those are the most common LPR symptoms that you may or may not appreciate, but you may just not have any symptoms.
It was scary for me, as I've shared in a past podcast. I lost my range in singing. I literally had 6 notes that I was able to sing, where you talk about I had an octave, I had 4 octaves, and it took a 2-year rehabilitation, and you were a part of the rehabilitation. And so I said it to you, and I've said it before. I'm so grateful for your work and the things that you taught me in the process of understanding my voice to another level, to another space. What other kind of ailments or issues and concerns do you see coming from other walks of professions?
Well, the most common medical conditions which can co-occur with a voice disorder are going to be reflux, allergies, for sure, because it creates congestion or swelling or irritation. And that's a real issue here in Metro Washington, D.C. Asthma, because it interferes with breathing, particularly the use of air, as well as the medications can interfere with voice. So that's another consideration, is not just the medical condition itself, but the medications that are taken to treat the other conditions. So for example, asthma, the inhalers can be an irritant to voice. With allergies, antihistamines may be of benefit to the allergy issue, but antihistamines and decongestants are actually very drying to the voice. And that is not of benefit to the teacher, professional voice user, whomever. And so then we end up, priorities have to be defined as to, what medications are or are not appropriate, and then having to deal with the side effects of those medications because we want you to be well.
Right. Do you ever speak to your clients about some natural remedies? Do you share that, both Western medicine and homeopathic remedies?
Well, oftentimes people will bring those ideas and suggestions to me. First and foremost, they should really clear that with their referring physician. Granted, some physicians may or may not be so receptive to that, but it's all about really what works best for you. So you have made some choices about what works best for you that may or may not work for me or the next person, and that's all that matters. The challenge is we don't know everything there is to know about voice and medicine, or even other supplements, whether it's more Eastern medications or even other things. There was actually a study that just was published. You got me thinking about using B12 shots.
Yeah.
B12 shots and voice. And it was found that in singers that actually B12, which is used to treat low cobalamin, which is B12, is actually, it does for singers who have mild symptoms. This was done out of the USC Voice Center, that there really wasn't an effect in regards to placebo versus B12. Though we do know that B12 has benefits, whether it's related to gut health, some reports on cognition and whatnot. So it really depends on where your priorities lie.
I have a few friends who are like, they are singers in the pop R&B industry, and they are working for some very busy clients and well, bosses, I should say, and they do the B12 shots for the fact that they are completely exhausted and they just need that instantaneous energy. They need to, find it, you're talking about 12, 13, 14-hour rehearsals, in one day setting. It's just that constant move. Do you think for yourself there's a detriment to constantly using that B12?
I've not read about that. As a side note, my dog gets monthly B12 shots, and his is for he was having absorption issues, and it has made a world of difference. I have no doubt that actually has improved his gut and really helped him a lot.
Okay.
His voice was always awesome, so he has a big voice. So I don't know about long-term use. I haven't investigated as to if there are any concerns or red flags about long-term use of B12. That's a good question.
Yeah.
And for your doctor as well. You bring up a really good point about just the hard driving demands, whether it's a performer who has 12 to 15-hour long days, but even other people such as yourself who just have long days. You have, performance or rehearsals or family demands, and the voice use goes on throughout the day, whether you are vocalizing or not. It's just the days are long, and that's a lot to consider.
Yeah. One of the points that you were sharing with me, because on top of being a singer and also being a conductor and just talking literally, I don't know, 15 hours out of the day. I mean, like constantly speaking, I'm teaching in front of the class, and how exhausting that could become. And you shared about just taking small breaks. Taking those breaks in between where you have nothing, 10 minutes to do some light lip trills or vocalizing, just, not doing any kind of speaking, vocalizing in the sense of the humming and just calming it down. Can you give some other suggestions to our audience about best practices?
Sure.
For that?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, which is, you didn't say it in these terms, but this is what you're implying or saying, is that your voice is an instrument that you take with you wherever you go. It is never not with you. You can leave your oboe at home or your piano at home. Your voice is an instrument that's with you, whether you are on Zoom, whether you're out at the clubs, though maybe you're not there now, whether you are out down at the cherry blossoms inhaling all the pollen, whatever, your instrument is always with you. Why does that matter? Because there are so many impacts to consider. So you bring up a really smart point about scheduling, which is anytime you have a moment to be quiet, I mean, 1 minute, 2 minutes, schedule your Zoom calls. So if you have calls or sessions, appointments, lessons on the hour, well, schedule them for 50 minutes so that you have 10 minutes just to clear your head, get up and move around, fill your cup of water, do your easy voicing, your easy, gentle, nurturing voicing. Yes, you need some quiet time, but the truth is you really need an opportunity to do something to reset or refresh your voice. And for me, I'll get up, I'll do two things. I really do. Well, three. One is water, which I have here. But the other two I always do is I get up and move around. It could be some stretches. It could be taking a lap around the floor, a lap around the building. And the third is easy vocalizing. So what can I take with me wherever I am? Lip trills. Lip trills. Now, not everybody can do lip trills, and they are hard to learn. There are other exercises, but do something that's easy, gentle, that rebalances the system so that you're good to go for the next meeting, you're good to go for the next day, you're good to go for the afternoon, whatever it is.
What are you, or could you recommend to singers to treat their allergies when they have to perform? And I guess that whole, post-nasal drip is just a terrible, terrible thing.
It really is. The postnasal drip and swelling too tends to be a real problem. You have to be careful with the decongestants, as I mentioned, because they tend to dry things out. Your vocal folds are lined with need to be lubricated, like with the mucous membranes, like the inside of your cheeks. That's what helps the vocal folds to vibrate and stay pliable and responsive to your efforts. The drier your vocal folds are, or the thicker the viscosity of the mucus, it weights down on the vocal folds, and then you just end up pushing harder to set them into vibration, or the dreaded throat clearing or coughing, which we absolutely discourage. So you need to come up with a means to deal with the mucus. So obviously talk with your physician to see what your options are. Other things, and obviously drinking water, but sometimes people find water slides over the junk, that it doesn't really break it up. And so I'll have people try things like gentle carbonation. And that may seem odd for some people, but something carbonated like club soda or sparkling water, not a ton of it. And if you have reflux problems, that make it complicated, but something carbonated, the bubbles, and not Diet Coke, because of all the chemicals. So something clean, because the bubbles will help to break up the crud, and people find it actually more refreshing on the throat. Dairy is a consideration. It's not that people have an allergy to dairy, though that does exist, but the dairy solids just tend to make mucus thicker. The other thing that people often use is Mucinex. So Mucinex is a mucolytic. That means it actually thins the secretions. It doesn't give you more. It just thins it out. So this is regular Mucinex, not Mucinex with any decongestant or any other ingredients, just guaifenesin. And people find that Mucinex can actually be of benefit, and you just take that as needed. That's over the counter.
Okay, so I want to go back to two of the things that you had mentioned.
Sure.
There's one point that you had definitely shared with me that it's almost a myth, and the myth is about room temperature water versus cold water. I want you to talk about that, and I also would love for you to just share. And I know that there are plenty of people who are watching this and they've heard it a million times about why you shouldn't clear your throat, but I'm sure that there's somebody on here that doesn't know about why you
No, it's good. That's good. The water is really important. So first and foremost, the priority is drinking water. However you get that water in is up to you. I am drinking a cup of ice water. I actually have ice cubes here. If I had to drink room temperature water, I would never drink it. I'll be honest, because it just tastes awful to me. So whatever first gets you to drink it, that's the priority. The second is, yes, I hear it very often in the performance community that it should be warm water, or at least room temperature to warm water. The issue is once you actually put water into your mouth, your body is so warm, it actually warms it up pretty rapidly. The bottom line is whatever gets you to drink the water and whatever feels good to you. So I have had people tell me, I've tried cold water and really warm water works for me. Well, I'm not going to argue that. Whatever you're drinking it and that feels good, great. You can do hot water. I have people who do hot water with lemon or honey. That's a good thing too. Water is really your best friend. The goal is, like I'm doing here, the goal is sips. throughout the day as you use your voice. The goal is not gallons, and the goal is not gallons all at once. So if I got into the office at 7 o'clock this morning, if I drink a gallon of water then, and now it's, heading towards 5:30, and I didn't drink anything the rest of the day or now, my voice would be okay, but I would definitely be feeling the dryness and some irritation. The water has to be used throughout the day. If you drink water with exercise, with physical exercise, that's bonus water. That's not water for your voice. So you still need to drink more water for your voice.
That's so important. That's so good to hear. I'm sorry.
Yes, no, it's one of the most important things for a day where you're using your voice a lot, singing, speaking, whatever. Keep sipping on water. It keeps you hydrated, but it also helps promote endurance. As I mentioned a moment ago, the drier you are, the more likely your voice is to fatigue. Your voice is a biomechanical system. It's joints, ligaments, cartilage, and muscle, but it's lined with mucosa, and it will be much more responsive if things are hydrated. I don't mean that if you drink more water, all of a sudden everything's going to be awesome and normalize. But it also doesn't always have to be water. It can be, herbal tea. It can be non-mentholated lozenge or a piece of hard candy. It can be wet fruits. I've been pushing wet fruits like grapes or melon, like cantaloupe or watermelon. I realize it's not watermelon season here in DC, but wet fruits, papaya. Papaya, for an example, which is, I realize, also not a DC local fruit, but papaya has a natural enzyme in it called papase, which helps to break up secretions. That enzyme, so if you're dealing with, thickened mucus, you could try some papaya, fresh or frozen. Sometimes you'll see it cubed, frozen at the grocery store, and just see if you eat a little bit of papaya, does that break up the crud? Coughing, can I talk about the coughing and the throat clearing real quick? So when you cough or when you clear your throat, over here, you actually bang your vocal folds against one another. The whole point of voice and healthy vocal folds is always to minimize the pressure or the force with which the vocal folds come together, whether you're singing, whether you're speaking. And so throat clearing is incredibly traumatic to the vocal folds. Chronic throat, I don't mean just once, okay, but chronic throat clearing can lead to physical changes in the vocal folds. I have seen people where that is the sole sort of behavior that they struggle with. Everything else is great, but they clear their throat nonstop, and that creates changes, mucosal changes, either scarring or nodule formation on the vocal folds. So try not to cough. Try not to clear your throat. If you have allergies or you have an upper respiratory infection, treat for that. Do what you can to suppress it, or to minimize it, so that you don't further injure, injure the vocal folds.
What's the youngest age that you have had come to you about some of these vocal concerns?
Well, so I have worked with children probably about 4 years of age is the youngest, but they're not usually vocalists. They're usually children who have voice issues, and there's often other medical contributions. But I do work with actually a number of adolescents and older children, probably 8, 9, 10, who have voice issues related to singing. Almost always, it's one of two things. These are singers who are involved usually in group programs, different choruses. And obviously we're in the pandemic, so the circumstances have changed recently. And in my experience, it's usually a couple of things going on. One is there's not enough really individual guidance as part of a chorus. And so if students are encouraged to go louder, but they're not really really guided on how to project their voice without hurting themselves, they tend to overdo it, or they try to mimic others, and that's not necessarily best for their voice. But there's also then additionally co-occurring medical conditions, whether it's frequent upper respiratory infections, large tonsils and adenoids. Those are the glands at the back of your mouth or behind your nose and at the top of your throat. allergies. There tend to be other things going on as well that absolutely need to be treated aggressively to try to heal the voice.
Wow. I have a couple of, I thought immediately about a couple of students that I have, and I'm always so concerned about them because just their speaking voice is raspy and rough. And so when they're singing, I'm starting to recognize a level of strain and stress. And that's always concerning to me, especially with the young voice. And so, I'd love to be able to share something. One is sharing your information with them. That's one. And then two, but things that they can do, I can share with them to help them reduce that tension, that stress, because they naturally just speak from this very, like in their vocal fry.
Yeah. Yeah, so for people who don't know, though I assume many of you do, vocal fry. Vocal fry is when the voice tends to kind of settle into the throat, and it's this kind of crackly, gravelly type of voice. It can occur occur all the time, or it can occur like toward the end of a sentence. It comes and goes. It occurs across the lifespan. It occurs across the world. It occurs across genders. There's nobody who's more vulnerable than another. For children, you bring up two really good points. For children, or actually anybody whose voice who doesn't have a normal voice, normal, clear, strong, resonant voice, then they really should have an exam of their vocal folds by a laryngologist. A laryngologist is an ear, nose, and throat doctor who specializes in voice. The second is that it brings up a separate issue, which is what is appropriate speaking voice for anybody, whether it's a child or an adult. So the challenge is that the voices really should be more complementary versus conflicting.
Yes.
You shouldn't be speaking with a voice like this and then expect to have a singing voice like this. Like, they should be more complementary. I don't mean you should exactly speak as you sing. So for those of you who are sopranos, I am not. For those of you who are sopranos and spend more time perhaps in your head voice, you're not speaking there. You're still using your chest voice. But the placement versus vocal fry. So for vocal fry, it's very throaty. It's back. But the placement otherwise for speaking should be up and forward. My placement tends to run a little nasal because I'm from St. Louis originally. So I sound more nasal than people here in the mid-Atlantic. But the sounds are forward. They're not settled into my throat. The pitch of my voice is also not low and settled into my throat. And so that's something I would, as a speech pathologist, work with a child. The other thing I look for in children, this comes up in adults too, but in children is, are there any other behaviors which are compounding the situation from a speaking standpoint?
Wow.
So things such as behavioral issues, temper tantrums, or just being loud.
Yeah.
Being loud is okay, but you can be too loud too much. But yelling and screaming is never a good idea.
Right.
And so I do work with people of all ages, how to be loud without hurting their voices. So there's a number of variables at play, but the last thing that comes to mind is just warm-ups with the students and trying to give them an education, warming up their voice to ease into the vocalization. And second is education. I always ask adults, of course, but I do always ask children, why is this important to you? Why is your voice important? Because it can't be because I think so, though I do, and it can't be because their parents say so. I'm always looking for some intrinsic motivation. And sometimes it's so my friends can understand my jokes. And you may think, well, what do the jokes have to do with singing? But the issue is, if that's what's motivating for them, then that's all that matters. Or I want my friends to like my stories, or I want my friends to be able to hear me and understand me without asking me to repeat myself or whatever. I'm always looking for motivation from everybody, but particularly children, and have them define it for me in their own words.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I remember there was a question that came in from somebody in regards to, they were always told that it's a myth about speaking in their head voice versus what they were considering their chest voice. And, is there really a conflict between the two? And I remember specifically, that's one of the things that you had shared with me, because when I first came into you, I was like, I used to love just speaking. That's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, I thought that was just a great way for me to talk, and it felt easy. And then I was wondering why I was struggling to reach these high notes I always had. But I mean, it wasn't there because there was this, conflict that I was bringing to myself and my own voice. So I'm so glad that you
it's not a point of blame by any means, but it's about balance. And, you have one set of vocal folds. You don't have a speaking set of vocal folds and then a singing set of vocal folds as well. They're the same set. There should be a balance, the balance between airflow, which is the foundation of voice. There should be a balance between airflow, vibrations of the vocal folds, and then resonance, how the sound travels through your head. And so if you're out of balance for speaking, and maybe not you, but the majority of people spend their day with their speaking voice. They spend much less time in their singing voice, unless your life is a musical. But yeah.
All of our lives are musical.
Exactly. We'll have to, pandemic. We'll have to, come up with a musical title. But we spend all this time with our voice, and there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a purposefulness to use of the voice. The voices won't be exactly the same, and that's not the intent. The speaking voice, since you brought it up, the speaking voice is very thyroarytenoid driven. So the thyroarytenoid muscle is the muscle of the vocal folds. And so that's predominantly chest voice. Head voice is predominantly driven by the cricothyroid muscle. So the cricothyroid muscle is still part of the voice box, but when you do an exam of the larynx, you cannot see it because it's on the outside of the voice box. And the cricothyroid muscle is responsible for raising pitch of the voice. So as you go up into head voice, that muscle becomes much more active. It is never an either or. They are always working together. It's about which one's sort of more influencing more at the moment. And so speaking voice is predominantly chest voice. It's predominantly thyroarytenoid activated.
Singers were always cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs about dairy, because always to me, dairy is like uber's detrimental. Before you sing and you want to, eat some yogurt and some pizza and all of this stuff, I'm not sure how people don't feel the phlegm that just develops, or drink a nice glass of milk. But what are your thoughts? They would like to know.
You really have to pay attention. So for me, dairy does not bother me at all, except for high-fat ice cream. High-fat ice cream will immediately give me phlegm. But anything else, milk, yogurt, soft cheeses tend to be more offensive than like a hard cheese like Parmesan or something.
Right.
Yogurt, cottage cheese, milk's already mentioned that. And so what you're looking for, so experiment with it. Okay, tomorrow have your cup of yogurt. And you're looking for, does this make you phlegmy or give you more mucus at the time? I don't mean 12 hours later. If it's 12 hours later, it's something else. It's within the time frame that you've had your cup of yogurt. Do you feel phlegmy or not? If you don't, then you're okay with yogurt. Now, granted, you have to pay attention to different brands, different fat levels.
Right.
And the same thing goes for milk. Okay, so you're not tolerating whole milk, but do you do better with 2% or skim? Do you do better than with the dairy or the milk alternatives, almond, grass, cashew, oat? There's so many soy, there's so many milk alternatives. So you need to test things out for yourself, because just because things are an issue for you, Michelle, doesn't mean they're an issue for me or for the next person.
Right.
I, however, would never encourage dairy before practice, before rehearsals, or before a performance. I would never encourage that. I would say have your cup of yogurt afterwards, and figure out something else nutrition-wise that fuels you. Pizza is not the best way to go just because of either the red sauce and the reflux concerns, or too much fat, or it's too heavy. Getting back to the reflux issue, well, not even the reflux issue, is that voice and singing are so much, not so much, they are respiratory driven. So respiratory driven means that there is movement of the abdominal wall, the muscles along the front of your belly and the diaphragm. These are large muscles. Your vocal folds, you as with a female voice, your vocal folds are like the length of my thumbnail. Males are 1.5 times the length of my thumbnail. But the voice is driven by the abdominal wall, these big muscles. If your stomach is full, no matter what it was, it could have been just some brown rice and boneless, skinless chicken breast. But if you eat too much, or eat too fast, or eat too close to when you need your voice, it's going to throw you off. So you want to have nutrition to fuel you, but you don't want it to compromise your breathing, your support mechanism, obviously trigger reflux or anything like that.
I mean, that I get that way over water. I can have some water and then I can go and sing. And I'm always nervous because as soon as I start activating all of what I need to, diaphragmatically, all of a sudden I'm like, oh Lord, please don't let the burp come. Not in the middle, it's present. So I'm just even mindful about doing that. But Lord, I couldn't even imagine, having a big old bowl of yogurt or any kind of dairy before I sing. It would just, I know for me, it would just totally jack me up.
Sure.
Let's go on to this next question. Teachers are concerned, here we are going back into the classroom. So many of us using our voice is already exhausting. Some of us are in environments that are, nothing has really changed about the posture of, the building, and some buildings are just old and the ventilation systems aren't there. And now we have to wear a mask. Now we're tripling, quadrupling all of the other issues. What can you share with the educators or the people who have to use their voices constantly during the course of the day and are wearing these masks to keep themselves hydrated and not from being even more exhausted? I feel like I have to, use more energy when I have a mask on to speak.
It's a real struggle. It's definitely a struggle. And even lately, when I have in-person appointments at a distance, I've been double masking, and it's a lot. So I completely understand that. The second is we do know research has been done to support that teachers, in particularly, are specifically vulnerable to voice disorders, even without the mask or without these pandemic times of distancing and whatnot. Anything that can be done to minimize stress and strain on the voice obviously is desirable. Some of those things include the hydration.
Yeah.
The challenge there is what do? Do you remove the mask to hydrate? It's a real problem. I find that even in my in-person sessions, I drink much less water than, like, I can even sip on water here talking to you today, but in-person sessions, I'm drinking much less and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I want to be comfortable, and whoever's with me, I want them to be comfortable as well. I do bring them water and have them sip, but it's like remove the mask briefly and put it right back on, but we have big space and lots of distance. So water has to be pushed. The second thing is, and they've been looking at, there've been some studies looking at speech clarity, projection of voice, and types of masks. The problem is that there's so many different types of masks that people are wearing. So you may want to experiment to see, is there one that still gives you the protection you're looking for, but that doesn't feel quite as resistant to you? In general, people speak too loud. The sense is you feel like I have this mask on so that people can't hear me with my mask on. And the truth is they probably can hear you better than you think. And especially if you're dealing with younger people. I had somebody a couple of weeks ago who came in who was older person who was wearing hearing aids and we had a distance, well, that was really a problem because I had the double mask on and I had to really work to project. But I knew, I tried to back off, but I couldn't get away with it. I had to start speaking louder. But for the most people, I would start off in a conversational tone. I would not automatically go in pushing loud because the mask also interferes with how you monitor yourself. So 1 is hydrate.
Yes.
2 is not so loud. Try first to stay conversational. The second is go slow. There's a real tendency to speak fast. And if you go just a little bit slower, it makes it easier for the content to be consumed by your listener, child or adult. Make sure you're breathing. There's a real tendency to run on because the mask is there.
Yes.
And then the last point is for teachers in particular, and there have been studies to support this as well, is to use amplification. It doesn't have to be some big fancy system, but amplification in and of itself has been proven to be very effective in supporting teachers and their voice goals. Some school systems already have amplification systems available. You just need to ask.
Yes.
Some do not, but will support and provide funding for it. Some do not. I understand that, but any sort of portable amplification, portable meaning like, that has a headset like this, or, because you don't want to be encumbered by a microphone. You don't want to have to stay at a podium. You also don't want a lapel microphone. The problem with a lapel microphone is you have to project your voice for it to be picked up. And so like my headset here is a nice choice because the microphone is just off to the side of my mouth and I can speak conversationally and easily without having to force it.
That's a good point.
The last point, actually, to reinforce something you said, is take a break. Whenever you have a chance to take a moment, 1 minute, 2 minutes, as classes switch or between lessons, you're switching from reading to math or whatever. Anytime you have a moment to be quiet, anytime you have a moment, like even get all the kids, it may not be music class, but even just having the kids do some lip trills. Now, granted, it's a little harder with the face mask on, but, sometimes you think I need to be quiet. The body is telling you that you need to stop doing what you've been doing, which is pushing really hard and straining.
Right.
You need to do something that's gentle and nurturing. Lip trills or even sigh with humming. A sigh because it promotes airflow. So I didn't just go, If you just drive the hum, people can hum really wrong. I'm just thinking M, or you can do N. Easy voicing, continuous. We want vibrations forward at the teeth or the lips, air flowing. Just to get air flowing and the sounds back up in the head, out of the throat. Easy exercises. They don't require a lot of time or forethought to just keep the voice refreshed throughout the course of the day.
There is really so much more that I'd love for us to talk about. I'm going to have you on again. There was a particular question about the thyroids and having thyroid surgery. Maybe you can write something.
Sure.
Or just share real quick about.
I can comment on that real quick.
Yes.
So the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland. Butterfly meaning it's narrow here. Looking at myself in the camera okay, there we go. It's narrow here and then it rises up like butterfly wings. Okay, so it's much more narrow here and then it spreads out. People have thyroid surgery for all sorts of reasons, for benign disease as well as cancer. Benign meaning not cancer versus cancer. The concern about the thyroid gland is that it does ride low. So your voice box is right here. Okay. So it rides just below the voice box and along the sides. But what's the bigger concern is that it sits over the nerves, which go to the vocal folds. Specifically 2 different nerves, the recurrent laryngeal nerve, there's a left and a right, as well as the superior laryngeal nerve. So the recurrent laryngeal nerve makes the vocal folds open and close, and the superior laryngeal nerve is what puts tension on the vocal folds, changing the pitch of your voice. And so those nerves are what are vulnerable. The vocal folds themselves inside the voice box are not so vulnerable, except when there's a breathing tube down the throat. But that tends to be less of the issue with thyroid surgery. It's more that the nerves are vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if you ever have thyroid surgery, the surgeon should definitely advise you of the risk to those nerves. You can, doing voice exercises ahead of surgery or immediately after, it's not going to help those nerves do their job or not. Because if they're injured during the surgery, either cut or from retraction, trying to get things out of the way to get to the thyroid gland, or if it's involved in the tumor or the mass, that's a problem. And so then the issue is, if any voice problems develop, it's immediate, and they will take then a look at your inside your throat at your vocal folds to check the motion of them. So thyroid surgery is a concern for anybody, obviously for a vocalist or for a teacher, but it's a concern for anybody who has that type of surgery.
And in the rehabilitation of one who needs to have thyroid surgery, what are the things that you would suggest, like getting with a good speech therapist?
So it depends. So I do agree with that for sure. The rehabilitation really depends upon the position of the vocal fold. Okay, so if the left one, in the screen, if the left one's moving fine, but the right one is not. So if the right nerve was injured, it depends on where the vocal fold is seated. So the closer it is to the left one, the easier it is for it to meet it, and the easier it is to exercise that through a vocal rehabilitation program. The further it is away, meaning the bigger the gap is then between the vocal folds, the much harder it is to benefit from voice therapy. So how do you know? It's really two things. One is the laryngologist will examine the larynx, the voice. And the second is, I always see people, at least the initial evaluation, we do some diagnostic therapy. I'm always looking for, are you stimulable? Can you do something different with your voice than you walked in with? And so our goal, if there's this weakness of the vocal fold, our goal is to strengthen those muscles. You can isolate, like any other exercises you can do. You can exercise those muscles, but the goal is to do it without any stress or strain. So when I exercise physically, I want some sense of effort or exertion because I'm working hard, or I want to get stronger, or I want to lose weight, or whatever. You want some sense of effort. When it comes to voice, you don't want a sense of effort because then you're likely overdoing it. There's too much stress, too much strain. It'll cause rapid fatigue. Also, then you're likely not isolating the muscles that you intended to isolate and to make them do the work. You want the vocal muscles to do the work, not the throat muscles, because they end up choking off the voice. So,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited about this. I'm glad that people are excited about hearing it. And of course, this will be available to us all. I need to have you come back on, my friend. So
anytime. Happy to do anything for you.
I appreciate that. I do. Thank you, Muses, for being here with us today on the Muses Behind the Music. I want you all to join us next week, Monday, where the other half of my rehabilitation coming out of my breath doctor, Paula Potts, and the things that I learned. And we're going to have a very interactive 45-minute session about things that we can do all about the breath. I am so excited about that journey with you all. Thank you again, Laura. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay well. Oh,
yes.
April 16th, World Voice Day. One world, many voices.
I saw that on something you had on your post. It was on your post. World Voice Day.
Yeah, happy World Voice Day. It's every year, April 16th. Celebrate the voice.
Hey!
Yeah.
Okay. So happy World Voice. I'm going to send you an email and a text message on that day. Blessings to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye.
'Cause it's the music. the music.